Hi, I'm Amos Muredi, and we're going to discuss about this question: Can Africa develop without foreign aid? As we're going to look deeper about the foreign aids and debts, the effect that has caused to African countries. It has been a scenario to the African countries whereby mostly they depend from the Western countries to fund them and to have development in their countries through the fund they get from the Western countries. And really, this has really caused the African countries to get into debt, and it has not been a good condition for the African countries. Of late, we have a case whereby the United States of America had cut off their support of the USAID to the African countries, and you can see the great effect that has caused to the African countries. So, as we're trying to find the answer to this question, can Africa develop without the foreign aid? It's all about how can African being in its own, how can African stand in its own, and what are some of the things that African countries can do so that they can be able to stand in their own without depending from other countries like China and even the Western countries and these countries that really fund the African countries and they really get into debt. Let us look, is foreign aid really beneficial to African countries? From decade to decades, years after years, the African government have been taking loans and debts from the Western countries in order to have development in the African countries. But that's not been the case. We cannot really say there have been a big step made by these African countries when they get loans from developed countries and the Western countries. And why? Why all this is happening? The first case is about corruption. These loans have been beneficial not to a nation but to the individual people and individual pocket. Instead of benefit the society, it only benefit some individuals, and this leads to no development. And also, these debts have led to encourage of neo-colonization, whereby the African countries have been taken like a puppet, whereby the the Western countries or where these Africans get their debts from, they take advantage of them and they become vulnerable, whereby they do only things that the Western countries says and they don't have say. And when these debts get high, it leads to high taxation rate to the the common citizen in these countries. And because of these debts, in order to pay the debts, the government doesn't have any other option except to raise the rate of the taxation to the citizens in order to pay the debt. So as then we're going to look on how the African countries can have their own development. How can they stand on their own? So how can African countries really stand on their own? And this means that because Africa is rich with resources, Africans cannot lack any way where can be able to develop on their own without depending from the foreign aids or from the debts from the West. And there are many ways the African countries can have their own development as a continent without having to take this debt. And one of the ways we're going to look is promoting mining. We know African is a continent whereby we are really blessed with 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 a lot of minerals. We have gold, we have cobalt, we have these diamonds, but instead of we producing them to benefit us, it really benefit other countries, and it doesn't bring any much development to us because of the way we used to do things in mining. For example, we can see that the main method that we are using in mining is the old ways method of mining. If African countries can have their independent, they can have technology in their mining activities, this will help in improving their development, and also they can come up with a way whereby they can have independence in mining sector. And also the last thing we can do is discouraging foreign investors in mining industry. We know that when the foreign investors come to this country, they really invest, but they don't invest much. They only take the product they get from here to their country and invest their country. If the African countries can discourage these foreign investors from from taking advantage of their products and what they have here locally, and start thinking on how can they use this product on their own, like having the industries, having better mining structures, better wages to those who work there, it will really help into the development of the African countries. The other way that the African countries can develop on their own is by boosting domestic revenue. Africa will be more independent if they can have more collection of domestic tax than what comes from the outside. We have really much depend on what comes from the outside instead of having our own ways whereby we can raise our own tax. We have seen from the latest scenario of the United States of America, whereby they cut their support system, that is USAID, to African countries. And the president of America, that is Donald Trump, was arguing that why should we why should we use the tax of the Americans to support other countries? And this should be an eye opener to the African countries, and think about if other countries they have a lot of tax collection in order to a point where they can support other countries. What about us? We can also come up with a way whereby the domestic revenue that we get within Africa and the countries we get within should be should be much more than what we depend from the outside, maybe in wildlife, maybe in tourism or export that you get here. If you can come up with that way whereby you can raise the domestic revenue tax that you get inside the African countries within us, it really lead to development of the African continent. Industrialization, if African can come up with more industries because they have more product but they lack industries. If the government of African countries can come up with much industry whereby we have the product that we are getting from Africa, but instead of taking them to outside continents or outside Africa to get the final product, we can have these industries here in Africa. And if these industries they will be much available, that means we don't have to have more export. We just have to have what we produce here, we manufacture it here, we have the final product from here, and it will really benefit to us. And when we have high rate of industries in the African continent, that means that it will lead to increase in collection of tax from these these industries, and also it will lead to high rate of employment, and it will reduce to such things that come up with unemployment activities that we have here in Africa. If we invest much in industries, it will help African to develop, and it shows that African can have development on their own. We know that agriculture is the backbone of Africa, and if we promote the agriculture in Africa, this means that it will lead to the development of African countries. And one of the ways we can do that is by ensuring maximum production of food within Africa. And this can happen whereby we use new technology in farming. Instead of depending on traditional ways of farming, we use the new technology system in our farming method, and it will lead to high production of food and products that we might export to other countries. And also when we focus on having much product, we also want to minimize export of agriculture products, because we really take a lot outside than we use here locally. You can get a product here in agriculture is much expensive than is less expensive than what we get from is much expensive than what you get from outside countries. So this means when you minimize the exports, or we minimize what we get from the outside countries, it really help in development of African continent, and also improving on horticultural farming as a new method of farming in Africa, it relates to the development of the African countries. And lastly, we are going to look about the increase on import duty tax. These are taxes that come from outside countries, and if we could raise the rate of high, we can raise the tax rate from duty tax, it will lead to having more foreign revenue, and this would prevent manipulation by Western industries, whereby they come up with their cheap products and bring it into African countries. And also it prevents trade deficit, where this means that where a country imports more than it exports. If we have more more in, more exports than imports, it will really benefit to African continents than the way we expect much to come in and we have less to take out. And that's all about some of the ways that we can navigate to have development in the African continent, and some of the ways that we can initiate in our countries and in Africa in order to stand on our own, because I believe African is richly blessed with minerals and other things that we don't have to depend on other countries, but we can stand on our own. And thank you for watching this video.